If you are a regular reader of fantasy and mythology, you have read a lot about gods and you have read a lot about pantheons, different pantheons. Some are connected to real mythology that have existed or exist, and some pantheons are related to fantasy books, which is made up. This is a video on how to think if you want to, so to speak, create your own pantheon. That could be interesting for you if you are writing fantasy. So I'm targeting this video especially for you, or if you just are curious on the subject because you've read so much mythology and fantasy, so you start to see patterns here. And with that said, I respect all kind of faiths and religions, of course. So this is not being disrespectful in any way. This is just something I've spotted during the years of reading. So first of all, I wanted to highlight the structure of the pantheon. I mean, pantheon is a many gods. Common pantheons: Greek mythology, Norse mythology, Hinduism, for example, has pantheon. Egyptian gods, for example, there are many all over the world. That's why this is interesting, I think. First of all, you can see patterns that the gods relate to nature. They can relate to feelings or to other traits. So let us think about nature for a while. So nature, what can that be? It can be the sky, for example. You can think of a sky god. And if you know a sky god, please write it in the comments below. It can be a thunder god. I live in Sweden, so it's easy to think of Thor, for example. It could be a water or an ocean god. We can think of Poseidon, for example. There can be a god of the earth, for example. It could be gods connected to wind, to nature, and maybe to forest, for example. Forest is usually a very mythic place, I would say. And gods can also be related not only to the sky, I mean sky as we see it, if I look above here, outside the window, but also to heaven itself. It can be related to hell, and then it becomes more of a religious, spiritual concept, but still it's part of a kind of uh, geography when it comes to nature. Also, gods can, of course, be related to geography from where they come from. Greek mythology, Roman mythology, for example, they are very close, different names for various reasons. That is a topic for another video. We also have gods connected to feelings, and feelings can be gods connected to anxiety and worry. If you pray to the god, the anxiety, worry you have can be reduced. Hanuman is an example of that. Hanuman Chalisa, a hymn you could call it, that you can sing for yourself if you are a believer of that. There are also gods of anxiety and worry. Maybe not so much in fantasy. I haven't read that so much yet, but maybe you have examples for me. Gods can be connected to joy and happiness, of course, for celebration. And we have gods connected to sorrow. I mean, if you need sorrow, if you have a loss, for example. Gods can also be connected to kindness, of course, generosity, sharing. And we also have gods connected to, or goddesses, I have to say, of course, connected to equanimity, being balanced, being just, for example. Goddess of justice also exists, of course. And then we have other traits that can be common when you read about pantheons. It's gods connected to war, like Ares is a Greek god, if I remember right. We have strong gods, powerful gods, of course, as well. And we all have also gods connected to peace. These are just some examples. If you have more, please write it in the comment below or connect on my community page, and you can write there, of course. I think if you are about to create your own pantheon, maybe this is just theoretical for you, maybe not, then there are a few questions you can ask yourself. I have listed 12 questions. Number one, do the gods relate to nature, feelings, or other traits? the thing I've just talked to you about. Are the gods reliable? Are they trustworthy? Can you believe in them? I mean, can you trust them always, or are their behavior inconsistent, for example? Loki is such a god in Norse mythology. He's a kind of trickster god, for example. But in many pantheons, not all the gods, but many gods are non-reliable because the stories teach us moral lessons, you could say. Very common in Greek mythology as well. You can think about if gods intervene in mortal affairs. Are they just gods in the sky or wherever they are, and they exist in the mortal's perception and mortal's reality because they pray to the gods, or do they have an effect on the world, on the fantasy world that you are writing about or that you are creating? Easy example is Greek mythology. They have obviously an effect on the real world, like in the Iliad, for example. You also have the Malasan Book of the Fallen, which you know I'm an avid reader of. The gods really, really intervene there. You can also think about if the gods are very certain and convinced about what they believe in, what is right, or do they doubt? If they doubt, it can create a dynamic in your pantheon, and I think some air in your pantheon, and some opportunity for your readers to make their own interpretations. I suppose pantheons made for younger people are maybe more fixed. The gods might be more certain, and it's easy to say who is good and who's evil. If you read fantasy that are more mature, then the gods usually are much grayer. They're gray. Not so easy to know who's good, evil. Maybe it's sometimes they're evil, sometimes they're not. Do the gods possess or give magic to people? Magic is a complicated subject in fantasy, but sometimes the gods have the magical power and mortals draw power from the gods. That's one thing to think about when you create your pantheon. You also have to think about if there are stories. Probably there are. I mean, that's maybe a no-brainer. Do the gods have special stories that represent them or personify them, or in any ways? Is there a story that should be told to the reader? Many gods, both in fantasy and in mythology, have background stories, you could say, that also overlaps to comics, for example. Marvel and DC, for example, where the gods usually have origin stories. Similar to a fantasy pantheon, that's something to think about, and if it's useful for the reader to know that, or if it's just excess information, it's useless to it's a lore dump, and maybe that's very negative to describe everything about all the stories. But if you like it, you can do that, of course. I love lore, so for me that's no problem. Have the gods been part in anything, any big happening in the world you are writing about? It could be, to make this easy, are they part of the creation myth, for example, or are they part of how the continents are arranged, the geography? They can have an impact on the world through the stories. So are there special important stories, canonical stories, you could say classics in the fantasy world you are building? Think about that. That could be interesting and important also for the mortals who live in the world. You can think about if mortals can become gods, or if the gods can become mortals, or at least lose their status. That is very common in Malasan Book of the Fallen, and you have a similar concept in Greek mythology. And in Malasan Book of the Fallen, it's if no one believes in the god loses his or her power. Sounds reasonable in a way. That's something for you to think about as well. I like this ladder, you could say, where you move up and down. But in some fantasy worlds, maybe the gods are more fixed, and also in some real mythology and real religions around the world, that goes for them as well. You can also think about what symbolizes the gods: temples, altars, symbols, rituals. All of this is important when you create your pantheon and to make the pantheon alive. You can also think about how mortals communicate with the pantheon. And since this is fantasy, are there different races in your world? Do they have different gods, for example? Are there conflicts between different groups who belong to different gods or religions? There are a lot of things you can do here, as you hear. That was my thoughts. So now I'm very interested to hear your thoughts on this very niche subject, but fun subject. And if you're still here, I wrote my own stories when I was a small boy, and I do some own writing still. And me and a friend, we drew maps, fantasy maps, and made stories about them. Not so different from Steven Erickson and Ian Seselmont, who did it, but they also made something of it. They made a big fantasy universe of Malazan Book of the Fallen, which is great if you haven't read it yet. So that was everything I had for today, and please comment, subscribe if you like this, and write on Twitter or on the community page if you're interested. The Twitter account is The Nostalgic Dragon. Thank you so much. Have a nice evening.